What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. My kids are probably gonna walk in as I'm recording this, and so this is not going to be a long video. But I wanted to get back in the habit of putting content out there, which I haven't been doing lately. But I'm starting again, right today, in fact. And Mental Health Monday. I know some folks have asked about that, so it all coincides, and it makes for an easy video because this weekend I watched the documentary Grunt, featuring Hector Bravo, who a lot of you guys will recognize from that Prison Guard YouTube channel. I'll put a link to the documentary in the description. It's on Amazon Prime. My only regret is I rented it first, right? So I paid $10 to rent it, and you got like 48 hours from when you first press play to watch the whole thing. And I watched it all in one sitting this weekend with my lady, but then I wanted to watch it again, and so now I got to go buy the damn thing to be able to watch it more, which I normally don't do. But very well done on a technical level. It was incredible. It he has a lot of raw footage of him overseas, right? And so you see him as a young man with a bunch of other young men doing what folks do when they're fighting a war on the other side of the world. And then you have his kind of narration and his reflections, right? And whatever else you may think of Hector Bravo or his content or anything else, he is good at painting a visual, right? In my opinion. I happen to also like his channel and a lot of his content, but he's good at painting a visual for folks to really see what's going on, and it is graphic, right? But it's powerful. It's powerful. And so why is this part of Mental Health Monday? I have I have noticed over the years that there's a similarity, for lack of a better term, between or among those who have been incarcerated in the California Department of Corrections, particularly those that have done some time on higher security yards or have politicked a bit. And I'm not saying that makes folks tougher or anything else. Just that's the group I'm talking about, right? There's a similarity between them and people who sign up and go see combat in particular. I have friends and family that have done it. I've had countless conversations with all kinds of folks, right? That different branches of the service and everything else. And we find common ground when we talk. And of course our experiences are very different. I'm not equating going to war in Iraq with going out to the yard in prison necessarily. And socially they are very different, right? One is a lot more socially acceptable than the other, you know. But like I said, there's a similarity. You guys let me know in the comments what you think. I know a handful of you guys have served in the military, and then some of you have served time, and so I'm curious what your thoughts are. But that's been my experience, and it's no different. I've had plenty of conversations with Hector Bravo and reached the same conclusion. And watching this documentary, it's interesting to see some of that stuff kind of come to light, and so one of the more lighthearted things that caught my attention was he's introducing. He's got like this home camera or whatever, and he's introducing different guys and where they're from, and they're from this town, they're from this state, and he's like, man, it's crazy. We're all teenagers, young men from all over the country that are now brought together in this brotherhood of service, right? In this brotherhood of the mission, and very diverse, very different people, but we're here with one mission, one thing in mind, and we are united around that, right? And that makes sense to me, and it's funny because I had a similar experience in prison when I started meeting all these other Northerners, right? Being from the Bay Area, there's a level of arrogance there, right? A little chip on your shoulder when you're from the Bay Area, at least in my opinion, at least from my era. And I was no exception. I wasn't set tripping, but I was cocky about where I'm from, right? And then you go to prison and you start meeting people from Tulare County, which I had never even heard of. And all these, not, shout out TC, it's not personal, but just all these other little places and these little towns. And it's funny because I can drive down 99 now, and see little signs. Oh, Lemoore. Hey, I know where Lemoore's at. And all these little spots, and you meet these dudes and they're homeboys, right? They're northerners, they're norteños, they're homeboys, they're whatever. Uh, but their lived experiences are very different. You know, they where they come from and what their neighborhood is like, their style of dress, their style of talk. There's a lot of diversity within within kind of the northern car, if you will. Uh, but yet that's still your homeboy, and really whether you like him or not, that's your homeboy. Whether he's a jerk or not, that's your homeboy. You make it work because again you're united around something. And again, I'm not attaching a value to one or the other, but just a similarity. One of the things that was really kind of emotional that he pointed out was this idea of losing your innocence. And he talks about the loss of his friend Doc, and how that shattered something in him. You know, guy lost his life. I believe it was a roadside bomb, and uh, and how it really hit home. And I had that experience prior to prison, to be honest. But that's how I felt when my brother got killed, like a year before I went to prison. You're young. There's plenty of violence. I knew plenty of folks that have been killed, and was used to everything. But in our lives, to a degree, I won't say if we're lucky because you're not lucky to go through this, but maybe lucky to have that or blessed to have that depth of a relationship with somebody where their loss hits you like that, right? It's transformative. Um, Not all loss is equal. Not all pain, not all trauma is equal. And so hearing him talk about that transformative experience, it was relatable for me. And I think people, whether they've been in the service or they've been in prison, can oftentimes relate to that. But the bigger concept of losing your innocence in the service, um, because of what you're exposed to and because of what you need to do, and the sense of humor, right? The gallows humor, if you will, where they're joking about, blasting people and beating up kids and stuff, and not joking like, oh, let's go beat up the kid in the lab, but just they're joking in a type of way that makes sense for the environment that they're in, right? And for what they're going through, you know, and they're using language that, from I think a civilian perspective, can be kind of off-putting. Hey man, you can't talk like that. You can't. Damn, that's not funny. That's foul, right? Nah, come on, man. We're soldiers. It is what it is. And I'm reminded of a conversation I was having recently with a guy named Brant Daniels, right? Two Scoops, which some of you guys have probably seen videos about. He's currently incarcerated in the California Department of Corrections. I would say that he fits the mold of what I was saying earlier in terms of, people that have been on some higher security yards and played a little politics maybe. So him and I have been talking lately. We're gonna do some content. He has a channel, Solid Behind Blue Eyes. I suggest you guys check it out. I'll link to that actually in the description too. Um, and so head over there and support what he has going on. But in one of our conversations, we were talking about his indictment. Right, they recently had a RICO indictment, and how it was picked up on one of the wiretaps that he had chuckled, right? Cackled, chuckled. I don't, it, he laughed about somebody getting blasted in prison, right? About somebody getting, losing their life, and how that was so meaningful in the trial, But when you take it out of the context of where you are, right, and then you show a jury, hey, this savage dude is laughing about this poor guy getting killed, but he ain't a poor guy. He had that shit coming, and hey, you play, you pay, right? You don't pay, you get blasted sometimes. It happens. It's There's things that you go through, and there's norms and there's coping mechanisms that as a community, people develop to endure where they are. It's the human condition, right? It is a part of survival. And when you view it out of its rightful place, then yeah, it can seem wild, but that is what prison does to you. And that is what war does to you, right? Clearly. It it is what it is, you know. Folks will do things in prison and react to things in ways in prison that they wouldn't if they were your neighbor on the streets. I reacted to stuff in prison in ways that I don't react out here. Hearing Hector Bravo talk, and he's like, "Man, there was a bomb, and there's just flesh on the ground, and it's steaming because it's cold outside, and these Iraqi soldiers are pulling people out of the car and just beating the shit out of them because they're mad and they're hurt, and you don't see that driving down the road here, right? Like, it is entirely unacceptable to just throw a temper tantrum in the road, get out and start beating people up, right? That is not normal. And I'm It's hard to say normal. It's not a term I really like to use because I think it's all in context, right? What is normal kind of depends on where you are and what you're experiencing, but it fits there, right? And there's stuff in prison that fits there. And our challenge as people who don't remain where we learn those coping skills, where we develop those defenses, when you come back to society, that shit don't work no more, right? And I know Hector Bravo's talked about that on his channel. He talks about it a little bit in his documentary. Like, look, I saw and did stuff over there, and I was 19 years old, 20 years old, 21 years old. Like, I was a kid with a bunch of other kids, and shit happened, and I didn't know how to adjust to that, right? So turn to drugs and turn to alcohol and turn to these other things, right? Trying to cope with what I experienced. You can't make that experience go away. You can't erase it. You have to find a way to deal with it. And that's not always so easy. And we hear about that a lot when it comes to veterans. There's a lot of veterans homeless and on dope and messed up in the head and all kinds of stuff because the same government that sends them over there to do these things is not so willing to embrace them and help them when they come home. And even if they are willing, too often folks aren't qualified to be able to provide the help, right? That's from an outside perspective. That's my opinion. The same thing happens with people who go to prison, right? Is folks then come home, and thankfully, because a lot of lifers have been getting dates, and guys that did 20, 30 years are coming home, and they have these halfway houses, and now there's a lot of programs that are run by folks who did time and know what it's like. And I've been fortunate to be a part of those programs and do some of that stuff. So I have a little firsthand experience with it. I think because of that, because of the culture shift that was happening for a few years, I feel like we're shifting in another direction now, but that culture shift that happened for a few years, right around the hunger strikes and just the attention and the legislative changes, you had more competent, qualified people who lived it, who were then out here like, bro, we can do this, right? You can do this. This is how we do it, right? And it's not some easy roadmap or just check these boxes and everything is fine. No, it's a journey, right? It's a living. That's what life is, a journey. It is a process. It is an adventure, right? And you got to go through it every day when you wake up. You got to fucking go through it, and you got to figure it out. And you also got to do that in prison, though, right? When you wake up in prison, you got to go through it and you got to figure it out. And the shit that you do, and the tools that you learn, and the way that the environment is set up, right? Because none of us created the norms that exist in prison now. Those norms were created for us by other people, right? You walk in at 19 years old, you ain't running shit. You're learning how shit is run. That's what you're gonna do, and you're gonna get on board with that, right? So you go through that, you develop a way to make it through, right? And how do you survive in there? Like I said, you gotta come home. right? For those that are fortunate enough to get that chance. And this ain't there. You know, this ain't Iraq. You know what I mean? This ain't Salinas Valley. It's the streets. It's different out here. You know, and most people out here didn't have your experiences. When you go to the store, most people in the store haven't lived a life quite similar to yours, right? If you've had either one of those experiences, you know, so they don't know any better, and they're doing what they do, and you kind of got to get on board, or you get left behind. You know, same thing. You're not going to come out here and change society, right? You come out here and figure out your program. You know, and obviously Hector Bravo has done that, right? He's found his lane, and he's found a level of success in what he's doing. Um, he's found a way to stay sober and stay out of the military and go through the hardships of day to day life without, you know, catching a case or or punching his ticket, right? And some days that's a miracle, right? I'm not saying for him, but just in general for all of us, right? I have found a way to exist outside of prison and not go back and not punch a ticket, and some days that's the best I have to offer, man. Right? That is my greatest accomplishment on some days. Is fuck, I ain't in prison. You know, I didn't catch a case. Not most days. You know, most days aren't quite like that, but there's been a few. And we gotta be okay with if that's you, or if you have those days, embrace that, right? Celebrate that. Survival is better than the alternative, you know. So don't hide from that. But then figure out a way to make some of these days a little better, you know. And like I said, he has done that for himself. Um, I would argue that I've done that for myself, and a lot of you guys watching have as well. And I hope that the folks that are currently incarcerated, I hope the folks that are currently in the service, uh, get a chance to do that also, right? To come out here and find their way, you know. Um, it's a beautiful thing, man. It's a beautiful thing. It's a struggle sometimes, um, but it was a struggle in there too, right? And I'm sure that he would say the same, you know, in terms of the service. So, anyways, just kind of some off the head thoughts of watching this documentary, and something that I think a lot of us can relate to. I'm specifying veterans and convicts, because he's a veteran and I'm a convict, and I can kind of see that similarity. But you guys let me know, because I don't think it's unique to just those two demographics of people, right? So let me know what you think in the comments. Does this make sense? Am I just rambling? You know, let me know. Help others move with excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time, because you're worth it. Help your community because they need you. And check out Solid Behind Blue Eyes, man. Two Scoops and his wife. Again, I'll put the channel in the description. Stay tuned for some stuff with us. And then obviously the link to Grunt, which you can find on Amazon Prime Video, will also be in the description. And I'll be back, man, tomorrow morning with another video. You guys stay tuned.